Hello and welcome to the Michael Mamas Show, Ancient Secrets Revealed. I'm your host, Michael Mamas, and we're coming to you from Mount Soma, home of the Sri Someshwara Temple in the mountains of western North Carolina. A few things I wanted to bring up before we get started. One is, well, this is premature. I probably shouldn't say it right now, but it came to mind. I'm trying to get, it's looking like it's possible I may get a national spot on television. We'll see. It'd be nice. I'd like to have this show go that way, but we'll see what happens with that. It's in the very early stages, so it's a long shot, but it'd be fun. I'd love it. Also, I've been getting a lot of emails. People are really afraid, it seems, of what's going on in the world today, not just with the virus, not just with the borders, but just the whole thing, and fear of what's going on with our government and how we're losing democracy, and yada yada, goes on and on. Keep in mind, those of you that have been following me for the past, how long has it been, 25 years or more, I've been predicting this phase transition that whole time, and even longer. I've known about it longer, and I've spoken about it for decades. But it's been predicted, and you don't need astrology, though it's in astrology. You don't need numerology, though it's in numerology. You don't need what Lord Krishna told Mother Divine 5,000 years ago, which is, it's all very fascinating. But if you just looked at what was going on in the world, you'd see it coming, and it's arrived. We're in a phase transition, and it's from a period that wasn't so good to what they're calling the golden age, and it's working itself out. But like I've said, there's that turbulent period that goes from like when water goes to ice, right? When it hits 32 degrees, it gets more coherent, more settled as it cools. And then right at 32 degrees, there's a period of turbulence, and then it transitions into crystallized ice, which is very orderly and structured. It's a crystal. And we're just in that phase transition, that turbulent period right now. So it doesn't mean we can be passive and say, oh, well, it's going to go away. No, because that's been one of the reasons I've been lecturing about it and talking about it for so long. I've been talking about it for so long because if we could be more proactive in our approach to it, that phase transition can be more gradual. It can be more comfortable. It can be easier. There was a time, according to the ancient masters, that this was going to be like an Armageddon period. But it was also understood that if we do things like Mount Soma and the unified field generator that I've lectured about so much, and more people doing a meditation whereby they transcend, that can be smoothed out, and the phase transition could be gradual. It could have even been pleasant. We could have calmed all this down, but we did the best we could, and that would have involved building, a unified field generator that I've talked about here at Mount Soma, and having been completed, a decade or so ago. And it's all just a matter of money. We did what we could, and it's in the process. It's being built in the whole enlightened city, it's called. Probably people, some total investments probably is around $30 million. But it's going to take more than that to complete the thing. It's a huge project, And again, I'm hoping that somewhere out there's a billionaire or somebody that hears that. We could really get the next big leap forward for probably 50 million or something like that. And then for 200 million, we could have the whole thing huge, So that's what we're working on. And the point here, though, that I want to make is, please, when you see all this crazy stuff that's going on in the news and stuff, please keep it in context. It's a phase transition. We saw it coming. We've talked about it for decades. It will pass. And it's hard to say, is it going to smooth out in the next couple of months, or is it going to take the next several years? That it will smooth out. And we just have to do our best to weather the storm and proceed wisely. Uh, uh, there's so much hatred in the world right now. It's like right hates left. There's so many splits, so many divisions, Republicans, Democrats, racial hatreds and conflicts, and hatred. Hatred is an infectious disease. When there's hatred, people naturally have their friends and comrades and people they associate with join in, and then they hate, and then the people that are feeling hated hate back, and then they join in and get a good, and it just becomes this big infectious disease, like a cancer that grows, and it's taken over the whole planet. It's unbelievable. I imagine what's going on in Australia, and they're practically in total lockdown. I've heard that in Canada now there's a new law. You can't walk into a grocery store unless you've been vaccinated. And then of course, that's another split of hatred, isn't it? The vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. Europe is a mess. China, I understand the economy of China is really bad. And I've want to really emphasize, I've talked about the extrapolation trap, and that's another thing I've talked about for decades. Basically, extrapolation is like extending things out in time. Usually it's based on time. So for example, if it's 60 degrees at 8 in the morning, and it's 70 degrees at 9 in the morning, and it's 75 degrees at 10 in the morning, you just extrapolate that line out, and it's going to keep getting hotter and hotter. And so you thereby predict that within 2 days, the earth is going to burn up in a cinder. That's the example I've been using for decades. And the thing is, things cycle. It gets hottest in the early afternoon, and then it cools back down. We're going through a cycle right now. It's a major cycle. It's a huge cycle. There are all kinds of superimposed cycles. The sun rises and sets, 24-hour cycle. The moon, monthly cycle, goes from full to new moon. The annual, yearly. And then there are huge cycles. And so many ancient seers have talked about the bigger cycles, the yugas, the Mayan calendar, all like that. And we're at a huge phase transition right now. And it's into a good age. So don't get caught up in this extrapolation. So many people have written into me, and they're just in a panic. They're so afraid of what's going to happen to the world and everything. And yes, we have to be concerned, but don't get lost to extrapolation. It is a time to be proactive. It's a time to stand up, but stand up and think. The title of this podcast, Stand Up and Think. Courage or cower. We can't be foolhardy. Fortune favors the bold, but not the foolish, I like to say. But we do need to be bold. We do need to really access what we believe in. What do you really believe? And find that within yourself. The trouble with perspective, and there's so many perspectives out there, right? Right, left, racial, whatever, border, arbitrary line, or sovereignty, so many different perspectives. But the problem with perspectives is that, generally speaking, they crystallize. We get a perspective, and then it becomes like etched in stone, crystallized, unshakable. That's what we believe. That's who we are, and we can't see past it. And it's amazing to witness, something comes out in the news. How do we respond to something when it comes out in the news? Depends on which perspective is crystallized within your own awareness, generally speaking. I just saw a couple of people debating just the other day about the virus, and somebody was saying, well, look at all this evidence that's come out about how the vaccine is killing people and how ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine work. And somebody, oh, well, ivermectin, I heard that's just for horses. Ivermectin, I didn't mean to get into the details. I want the big picture here, but just while we stumbled on this, just in case anybody out there doesn't know, the guy who came up with ivermectin got a Nobel Prize for it, and not for horses. They used it and have been using it in Africa on humans for a long time, and it's saved, scores of lives. It's well tested. Same with hydroxychloroquine in the sense that it has been used for decades, and at any rate, then you get the people say, well, why aren't they allowing it to be used if it's so good, yada, yada. And then the people argue back, well, it's because the pharmaceutical companies can't make any money on it because it's just generic, but they can make tons of money on the vaccines, and that's what they're doing. The point is that I don't care if it's border or drugs or the economy, crystallized perspectives. It's a big problem, and when it comes to finance and money and economics and people having opinions on that, a college professor was telling me that in economics classes, and it's hard for me to believe, but at any rate, in economic classes, the professors, it's at the point now where they consider themselves successful if they can just convey the notion of supply and demand. If supply goes up, the cost is going to go up. If the demand goes up, the cost is going to go up. If supply goes up, the cost is going to go down. And I've talked about how I gave that lecture, and we got on that subject once, and people just got so upset. I hate money and all this stuff. Well, if you can't understand the basic concept, fundamental to economics, just supply and demand. There's a lot more to economic theory than that, of course, but that's just so fundamental. And if you can't understand that, what solid ground is your opinion on the economy based upon? It's like mathematics. You're not interested in addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. You just want to understand group theory or abstract algebra. It's not the way it works. So that's why I say stand up and think. We have to think. What are your perspectives based upon? Is it an indoctrination? Is it because of who you live with or who you associate with or what group you're identified with? Or have you thought? Stand up and think. And then we need courage, not foolhardiness, but courage. Fortune favors the courageous, but not the foolhardy. And so we're at a place now where there's so much fear that people are afraid to say what they believe. They're even afraid to feel what they believe. They've even buried their real self, how they really feel about something, down deep, 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 deep inside. They've buried it into a perspective that they've been so indoctrinated into that they don't even realize that they're lying to themselves. There's an interview, and I enjoy it, of Bruce Lee. This was way back as a black and white interview. It's actually on YouTube to this day. But he said that he got very philosophical. He was a philosophy major in college. And he said, honestly expressing yourself, it's very difficult to do. This is not word for word. But he talked about not lying to oneself, Uh, and he didn't use perspectives, but I think he's talking about styles of martial arts and how it becomes crystallized, like I'm saying about perspectives, uh, and you have to free yourself from that. I'm saying it's think, but it's also feel what's really in your heart. We get so caught up, what we believe that we don't see past it. Clarence Thomas. I saw a great little excerpt, when they were going after Clarence Thomas when he was getting on the Supreme Court and going through the hearings and that. And I think probably most of he's a black man, and they really were terrible the way they treated him and what they did. There was another excerpt from him. I hadn't seen it for a while, but he referred to it. He said, "This is just a new kind of lynching," But he said one of these senators, whoever asked him if he be willing to withdraw or thinks he should just withdraw from the whole process and not even try to be on the Supreme Court. He said something I really respected. He said, "I'd rather die than withdraw from the process." How many people have that level of belief, that level of conviction? Even if it wasn't literally true, which I believe in his case it well could have been. But even to have a feeling in their own soul that they could even say that, and stand up. It's time to stand up. But all too often people stand up before they've really thought, before they've really gone through that which is so very difficult to do, to find what they really believe deep inside, not what they've been indoctrinated into thinking, not because they only listen to this channel or only listen to that channel, but because they're really able to hold back that crystallization of perspective and not lose themselves to it. So many perspectives are so crystallized, people can't even find the self. They don't even know they're lying to themselves. And it's time for that to change. Right now, they've got humanity on its heels, People are cowering. The hatred is so intense that it's elicited so much fear. I've told some friends, I'd love to get on national TV and just talk about spirituality and this stuff. And it's almost like, don't put yourself out there as any kind of public figure about anything. I saw something on TV the other day. This woman was mocking religion. And it was, I wish I remembered to write down what she said. It was a very short sentence, but it was so pejorative, just nasty, But I have to admit that the way religion needs to be expressed, it needs to change to interface with the masses. Because this stuff about, if it's God's will, it's, where do people go with that? Oh, there's some God sitting somewhere on a cloud deciding if he wants your team to win the football game or not. And that stuff is all explainable. It's really a deep and profound knowledge. And I'll tell you, when I talked, I live in the mountains of Western North Carolina. I've bumped into over half a dozen Baptist ministers in my life, and I've had deep discussions with a number of them. They love it when they hear what I would call what word do you want to use? Rational or scientific, or like an understanding of the mechanics behind all of these different things. Jesus loves you. What does that mean? Well, it's deep stuff and it's explainable. I do it in my classes, but that's why I'd like to have a national TV show. I'd like to go through it all, and how that's the neat thing about Bruce Lee. I was talking about Bruce Lee a minute ago, is his knowledge was also, he was a martial artist. He fought, but he took these abstract, deep principles and he applied them to life, real life, on the street fighting, and they apply to everything. Deep knowledge applies to everything. Like I say, spirituality is the container, the vessel that holds all fields of knowledge. It's not like you got physics here, literature there, economics there, and oh yes, spiritual over in that corner. No, spirituality is the vessel that holds it all together. And so what I like to do is take these deep concepts, really explain them rigorously, what it really means. And then we see how it applies. And these days, right now, with what's going on in the world, how does it apply to international conflicts and the border and the virus and all these different things, you see? Jimmy Lai is another one. Jimmy Lai is great. He's an old guy. He was a big businessman in Hong Kong. Then when the Chinese started taking over, he really resisted, you know. And what was really cool about him is he said something at one point. He says, I'm an older man. He says, what can they do to me? He says, if they kill me, how much more life did I have to live anyway? I mean, the courage, you know. Oh, and then they threatened to go after his family because he had relatives in China. And he just said, I can't compromise myself. I can't compromise my convictions for anything, not my own life, nobody else's life. I have to do and stand up for what I believe in. Because once you lose touch with what you really believe, once you're not willing to consider different perspectives and find the truth, you've lost yourself. You know, to thine own self be true. So the mass mentality is very powerful, and it sweeps people along. If you're a drop of water in a rapidly moving current in an ocean, you're going to be carried by that. And so don't get caught in these tidal waves. Don't get caught in these eddy currents. Have the ability, when you see something going on, to be able to say, you know what, the emperor has no clothes. Right now, people are afraid to say the emperor has no clothes because they're afraid they'll get shot or thrown in jail or solitary confinement for 6 months or however long it's going to last for that one guy. History repeats itself. We've got the tidal wave of the mass mentality. I've talked about it before, the Bolshevik Revolution that was structured by a bunch of bankers to make money, to take over the banking of Russia, and it worked. Of course, classic example, I guess, Adolf Hitler took the whole mentality of a whole nation, and look where it led. And so it's always really, largely politics is a battle for the mass mentality. It's not so much about, oftentimes it boils down to not being so much about telling the truth as it amounts to controlling the mass mentality. It's time to stand up and think. It's time to, do you know that, well, gee, some of these things, this may not be true, I'll put it that way, but I heard that they did a survey of the people from Afghanistan that are now in this country. 99% of them are pro-Sharia law. 43% of them think a man should be allowed to beat his wife. I'm sorry, I even said it, but it came up. I saw it. It may not be true. What do I know? I didn't take the survey. But isn't that at least worth taking a look at, you know? Now, oh boy, this is really getting thick here. But there's another extreme, and don't miss what I'm saying here. But it is interesting too. Do you know, in the great humanity of our international businesses, some of them, they went into the Philippines as one example, and they started manufacturing widgets of some kind. I don't know. And so people started coming in from the provinces because they were paying so much money. So these people came into the provinces, into Manila, started working in these manufacturing companies. And then what happens is the manufacturing companies have a company store, and they were selling American cigarettes and different things like that. And the people who had beautiful lives, I mean, the provinces in the Philippines are absolutely spectacularly gorgeous, but tempted by more money, they come to Manila, they get this job, they get hooked on the company store. They were spending all the money they were making on the company stores, and they were living in certainly we would call it poverty. I mean, their houses are made out of cardboard and what's that, corrugated aluminum or whatever it's called, you know. And so the point is that there are different kind of cultural integrities. We don't have to make everybody like Americans for the world to be healthy. You know, the people living in the Philippines were doing great. And they did the same thing in villages in India. Oh, we feel so sorry for these people. They don't even have refrigerators. So, you know what happened? Some philanthropic groups went in there and gave them refrigerators and electricity and stuff. You know what happened to those villages and stuff? They went down the tubes. They went from living a type of life that was very successful and they were all very happy to poverty and misery. We need to have a certain level of respect. And I'm not saying, I'm not endorsing beating wives, please, or anything like that. But there is a lot more play into the uniqueness of different cultures than we're willing to credit to. Our perspectives have crystallized. And then do we think to help the world, we have to get everybody else thinking the way we do. And that is flat wrong. That is flat wrong. Okay. Adrienne, you have anything to add?
Nope, that's a bunch.
Yeah.
That's deep stuff.
Yeah. You know,
But
and
I really think you're right though. It's we all get caught up in the details, and the bottom line is we need to try to come from a deeper place, keep our balance, realize this is a really difficult time where you know, perhaps mass mentality is being engineered and, you know, put out. It's, you know, we have these social medias where an idea can be perpetuated throughout the world in less than 24 hours.
yeah. You know,
So
you
just
look at
trying
the
to
role
keep
of,
your balance with everything that's out there.
you look at the role of the internet, and the internet now has bombarded people with so many perspectives.
Yeah.
And either listen to them all and go crazy, or you get hooked
Yeah.
by one, and then
Right.
it's just this little sub niche in the internet that you listen to, and you're just spoon fed that on a daily basis, you know.
Well,
And
I think we grab onto the one that you know, vibrates, resonates with what we already believe, and we collude with that one idea or ideology or set of ideologies. And we're not looking for truth, we're looking for comfort, I think, you know, sense of feeling safe, a sense of the world being acceptable to us.
Adrienne, that's so deep, you know.
Yeah.
What did you say? Comfort. Where does comfort
Comfort.
come from? You know, they talk about elephants, and if you can't have one elephant. Elephants are a community. They have to live together. You have to have more than one elephant. They bond. Human beings are hugely that way. And we find tremendous comfort in finding people that we see eye to eye with and agree with and we resonate with. And that becomes so crystallized. Now, I'm not saying that it has to become crystallized, but I'm saying we're, as a species almost, we're generally speaking not there yet, you know? But boy, that word comfort is such an important one. And I think that's why, you know, and it's a great point, Adrienne. It's a great point. So important. You know? Yeah. Humanity is on its heels right now. People are afraid. You know, hatred breeds fear. And people are even afraid. You pick the subject. People are afraid to really feel into what they really feel. You know, to honestly express themselves, to fully be truthful to themselves, to not lie to themselves. We've been convinced that if we don't think a certain way, we're bad. And we rally around that so much that we lose access to our own being. And that is an inalienable right. Human beings need that. Human beings have to have that. And we might be able to suppress it for a while, but sooner or later it's going to come to the surface. It's inalienable, you know? And you know when all this started? If you really look historically, modern history, that is, I think it started when Nikita Khrushchev took off his shoe at the United Nations back in the 50s. He was pounding his shoe on the desk and saying, "We will bury you, and we will do it from within. We're going to invade your nation like a cancer and manipulate behind the scenes, to manipulate how people think, to manipulate what people think. And you can decide for yourself what side of each coin that manipulation was on. Was it left or was it right? Was it pro-boundary, pro-border, or anti-border? Was it globalist or was it nationalist? These are things that first you have to decide what you believe for yourself. And then you can also take a look and what do you think's going on in the world now? And how does that go along with, or how is it contrary to what lies deeper within you than what perspectives have been imposed upon you? This is a critical time. We all need to do this. And then we need to stand up for what we believe in, not foolhardily, but wisely. All right, I guess that's about it. Go ahead.
I have one more thing to add. It seems
Good.
like, people are coming in with laudable intentions, beliefs, ideologies, and there's this, kind of mass mentality machine you've been talking about for a long time that kind of sways what people believe about certain ideas, and it's been going on, like you said, since Khrushchev, before, since there's been politicians, that's been happening. But I think it really gained power about that time when, Khrushchev did that, because they had a literal plan to do that. It wasn't just some idea. But my idea is, I think that, the mass mentality machine puts out a laudable idea, something that's really good, and kind of catches people by promoting an idea that is good and right, and that people feel strongly about. But then what I perceive has happened, and I think historically it's happened over and over again, but I feel like it's happening very quickly here. Well, not here, all over the world, but I've seen it on our news, where these laudable ideologies are then kind of twisted into something that those people no longer believe in, but they've been kind of taken down this rabbit hole, where those laudable ideas have kind of been twisted. And so I think it leaves people, if they buy into something that's a little bit off, or they just ignore something that's a little bit off, and then there's another ideology that's put out that's a little bit more not quite right and doesn't quite sit well with those laudable intentions. And the next thing you know, that's right, exactly. And the next thing you know, they are associated on, both sides with one extreme ideology or another, when that's not where people are actually coming from.
It's a really good point. Generally speaking, the mentality of the people is laudable. They're well-intended. They don't align with Hitler or the Bolshevik Revolution or anything because they are malevolent. They do it because they think there's some truth here, something right. And it's easy to do. It's the nature of the human condition to do that. So it's not so easy to do, to find out what you really truly express yourself.
Yeah.
It's all
and
well
remember,
said,
remember what you feel deeply when what you feel has been kind of distorted and become something else. It's like going back to your own inner wisdom and trying to hold steadfast to that.
Yeah. It's almost like there's a mentality that says, please tell me what to think, please tell me what to believe, and please convince me that it's right.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of spoon feeding with that mass mentality, with what you're talking about too.
Yeah.
Just tell me what to think. It's easier.
A lot of people argue now that it's not Russia and Khrushchev, that it's China. And China's taking over, a lot of the media, a lot of the business, government, education. It's all being influenced, And I think it's important to keep. Khrushchev wanted to destroy America from within. He didn't want to take it over. He didn't want to unify with it. He wanted to destroy it so they could take over and rebuild it their own way, But first you have to destroy it. And look at the Depression, the Great Depression. It is a known fact now that was created on purpose by a handful of wealthy people so that they could buy everything for pennies on the dollar. And they did. That's exactly what happened. And that's why it's like, there's no regard for human life. Look at the hell so many people have gone through, not just the Depression, but wars and everything else. Why? So a small group could gain power and make money. To me, it's so incomprehensible that people could do such a thing. And I think for most of us, it's so incomprehensible. It is unbelievable. We cannot believe it. We do not believe it. And so it keeps happening. It's almost like, treat human beings as human beings. I mean, what are we? We're just rats in their eyes. They're to be manipulated and shuffled around to conform to their will. I do believe that sort of thing is out there. All they need to do is convince people of a perspective that's right, that leads the world in the direction they want it to go. All right. Anything else, Adrienne? Everything you're saying is great.
No, I think that's it.
All right. We've done it. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we will talk with you again next time.